Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back on Polls You Go, here with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. Let's listen to President Biden talk about evidence about Iran's involvement in the Hamas attack.
Is Iran behind the Gaza war?
I don't want to get into classified information, but to be very blunt with you, there is no clear evidence of that.
At this point, no evidence that Iran is behind any of this.
Correct. Now, Iran constantly supports Hamas and Hezbollah. I don't mean that. But in terms of did they have foreknowledge? Did they help plan the attack? There's no evidence of that at this point.
Kim, I have to say that's a distinction in many ways without a difference in my mind. Iran clearly has been backing Hamas. They have been backing them all along. Whether or not they said, hey, we're going to flip the switch, pull the trigger, you've got our support, is beside the point. They were providing weapons, money, no doubt technological support. They may have even supplied some of the technology for these gliders that were used to such damaging effect. So I think the big question here is, will the president's warnings to Iran not to escalate the conflict by giving Hezbollah in Lebanon or its proxies in Syria the green light to attack Iran? That's the key question. Will the president's warnings work to deter Iran from doing that?
And that's a tough question. Your point is exactly spot on. Let's just be really clear that Hamas would have been in no position ever to have staged the attack it did if it had not been funded and supported logistically and in other ways by Iran over years and years. And so, as you say, distinction without a difference. Now, the president said in that interview, he had a message for Hezbollah and for Iran saying, don't escalate, because obviously there is a threat now that you could have this spread into a multi-front conflict for Israel up in the north with Hezbollah and also in the West Bank, in addition to Gaza. And we're already seeing a little bit of that happen. Hopefully it does not spread. The president, so he had that message in that 60 Minutes interview. He's also obviously moved 2 aircraft carriers and cruisers and destroyers to the area. We have about 900 U.S. troops in Syria. He was asked about this, is there going to be any American engagement in this? And he said it's not necessary right now, and praised Israel for having one of the finest fighting forces. It's going to be really important to see how Iran takes statements like that and others that may come from the president. How willing is he to do something if necessary? Because I think what we know so far is that any Biden projection of deterrence up to now has not been necessarily consequential in terms of the decisions that Vladimir Putin made to go into Ukraine, in terms of Hamas in this particular case, and whether or not Iran was behind that. And that's the piece that I think is still going to be crucial for this administration, is backing up its arguments so that that message of deterrence is loud and clear, or else things are going to get even worse and be even more potentially problematic for America and American casualties.
Yeah, we don't know how many exactly Americans are held in Hamas, but if they are killed by Hamas, I think we have to hold Iran ultimately responsible for that. And the question becomes, how will the U.S. respond? And particularly if Iran takes action by giving the green light to Hezbollah in the north and they attack Israel, it will be hard for the U.S. to avoid taking some kind of military action in response if the president wants deterrence taken seriously in the future. All right, let's turn to another subject of more comic relief. The House of Babylonians, as in Babel, Tower of Babel, also known as the House Republican Conference. Jim Jordan, Ohio representative, spent the weekend trying to drum up support inside the conference after he won the majority of the conference support last week with 124 votes to become speaker. That's not an overwhelming number of support in the vote. But then on a second secret ballot, 55 members said they would not vote for Jordan. So he spent the weekend trying to persuade members to come around. Now we think there'll be a vote Tuesday, maybe a series of votes. As we speak, he doesn't have the majority, 217, to win on the House floor. But our sources do say he has closed the gap, perhaps to even single digits. Let's listen to Dan Crenshaw, Texas representative on CNN, talk about some of the strong-arm tactics that Jordan supporters are using.
What I would really recommend to Jordan's allies, too, is a lot of them have mounted this high-pressure campaign. They're gonna whip up Twitter against the people who are against Jordan. That is the dumbest way to support Jordan, and I'm supporting Jordan. I'm going to vote for Jordan. And as somebody who wants Jim Jordan, the dumbest thing you can do is to continue pissing off those people and entrench them. When I ask people who are taking that tact, I'm like, did that work on you when you were one of the 20 against McCarthy and everybody was bashing you? Did that entrench you? Yeah. Or did that make you see the light? Come on, people. Everybody's got to grow up, get it together. If there's differences, let's sort them out.
Well, Dumb and Dumber is the theme movie of the House Republican Conference, Kyle, so it doesn't surprise me that people would try those tactics. But I guess the question is, Jordan now, he ran against Scalise, got fewer votes than Scalise, but then Jordan's supporters wouldn't support Scalise, even though Scalise had gotten more votes in the initial support from the conference. Now Jordan wants Scalise's supporters and others who are frustrated that McCarthy was deposed to vote for Jordan because, hey, we got to get on with it. Can't have this chaos. So some convenience there in the argument, but it also does have an element of truth. The Republicans look like jokes, and they do have to get on with running Congress.
Yes, we're now 2 weeks almost without a speaker, and it does indicate that the people who deposed Kevin McCarthy didn't have a plan, didn't have a candidate. They didn't have any idea where this would go after they pulled the trigger. It seems to me that there are three arguments circulating in opposition to Jim Jordan as Speaker. One is that he has a history of being kind of a rabble-rouser, a bomb thrower, somebody who is arguing in favor of government shutdowns, one of those guys in 2020 who kept intimating that maybe the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And I think there's a segment of the party that is worried where he would lead Republicans going into the 2024 election. And are they going to get ads talking about how the House Republicans are now led by a MAGA speaker, and that's why Democrats need to retake the majority? A second group, I think, is hawks who are worried about, in particular, Ukraine aid. Jordan has not always been supportive about that. He voted against a $300 million Ukraine aid package last month. This was a procedural vote, as I recall. Steve Scalise voted in favor of that. So there may be discussions that are happening between some of those hawks and Jordan right now about what he would be willing to support and put on the floor. And then the third group is these loyalists of Kevin McCarthy or of Steve Scalise who are still frustrated that we've gone down this road in the first place, who maybe think that Jim Jordan did not give Steve Scalise enough time, a real shot at consolidating in the way that Jim Jordan is now trying to do. They feel resentful. They think that he gave Steve Scalise just enough time in order to fail and then show up and suggest himself as the alternative. And so it will be fascinating to watch on the floor tomorrow if we do get these floor votes. But I do wonder, as that clip from Crenshaw we played, I do wonder whether these efforts to squeeze those holdouts is only going to make them dig in further.
Kim, you've been doing some reporting on this. How do you see the support for Jordan unfolding?
I think that those categories of people that Kyle laid out are real. I would note, though, that some of this there has to be a division between what people feel in terms of bruised feelings about the process and how this has turned out to be what it is versus animosity toward Jordan himself. And there isn't as much of that animosity toward Jordan himself. Yes, he has been a bomb thrower at times, although do bear in mind that this is a guy who has been very close to leadership, including Kevin McCarthy. Gave a floor speech for Kevin McCarthy back in January during those 15 votes, did it again and again, did it as recently as 10 or 12 days ago when all of this kicked off, defied the Matt Gaetzes of the world. So that has earned him all along, I think, some real trust. He has certainly built some bridges in recent weeks between those who are concerned about foreign aid and, which is why he has the support of, for instance, like the House Intel Committee Chair, Mike Turner and others. So he's, definitely kind of settled all that. I think his challenge, which is what he's been attempting to do over the weekend, has been to remind everyone that for instance, there's a category of people that are just very angry still at Matt Gaetz and all of the rebels and jokers who provoked this situation. And they've got it in their head that if they now vote for a more conservative member of the caucus like Jordan, that somehow Gaetz is winning, and they don't want to give him that win. And I think this is sort of what Jordan and his supporters, which by the way include Kevin McCarthy at this point, are trying to say, which is try to separate this out from your views on the past. Do you think Jim Jordan can lead this caucus? By the way, if he can't, who is the alternative? Because one of the problems that the Steve Scalise's and others have is that those Gaetz radicals are simply not going to give them the votes. And that's a pity. That's wrong. But it is what it is. Versus if you get a Jordan and he can maybe get everyone behind him, there's a shot they can move past this. So I think that's the argument they've been making. I know for a fact that his team, has been reassuring that they claim they're not behind these pressure tactics, that these are a lot of their supporters that got a little ginned up. We'll see how many people buy that and if they manage it ahead. He may not get it on the first vote either. Bear that in mind. There might be some people who want to just have a protest in the beginning. The question is going to be, how do the numbers shift, or do they, as the votes go along?
All right. We will follow those votes on Tuesday, if indeed they do happen, and talk more about the implications of a Jim Jordan speakership, assuming that happens, or maybe we'll just have another couple weeks of chaos. All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you all for listening. We're back every day on Potomac Watch. We hope you join us tomorrow. Thanks for listening.